In an Oval Office encounter that has since ignited global headlines, the administration's handling of a contentious deportation case has raised profound questions about the rule of law and constitutional order in the United States. The televised exchange, marked by provocative rhetoric and dismissive responses to legal obligations, demands a closer look at the facts surrounding the erroneous deportation and the broader implications for democratic governance. Hey? At the center of the controversy is the case of a man erroneously removed from the United States, a citizen of El Salvador allegedly linked to the notorious Miss 13. In 2019, both an immigration court and its appellate counterpart found him to have been unlawfully present in the country, reinforcing the government's stance that his presence was illegal. Despite these legal determinations, a bureaucratic oversight led to his departure, leaving open the question of whether or not he should be repatriated. The administration has repeatedly emphasized that the decision to return him lies not within American jurisdiction, but with the government of El Salvador, which retains sovereign control over its citizens. The event unfolded during a high-profile meeting in the Oval Office, where a pointed question from a correspondent at CB challenged the president on whether he intended to request President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador's assistance in returning the deported individual. The question, blunt in its wording, drew a swift and dismissive response from the president. Citing the legal precedent that confirmed the individual's illegal presence and his alleged involvement with Ms. 13, the administration insisted that the deportation was a matter of simple administrative oversight, an issue of additional paperwork rather than one of substantive policy. Emphasizing that any further action would depend entirely on the discretion of El Salvador, the president went so far as to reject suggestions that his administration could or would act unilaterally to smuggle the individual back into the United States. In his remarks, the president ridiculed the notion of smuggling a terrorist into the country, a reference that underscored his reluctance to admit any responsibility for the oversight. His dismissal not only rejected the practical aspects of the question, but also mocked the broader implications of attempting to repatriate someone deemed a security risk. According to the administration, such a move would be tantamount to releasing dangerous individuals into society, a scenario that contradicts their efforts to transform the nation from being labelled the murder capital of the world into what they claim is now the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. However, the crux of the controversy is not merely a matter of bureaucratic error or administrative rhetoric. It lies in the clear legal mandate issued by the Supreme Court, which ruled by a 9-0 margin that the individual must be returned to face judicial proceedings since he was not provided the due process required by law. The court's unequivocal decision rests on the principle that any person facing deportation must be afforded their day in court. Given that the man in question is a citizen of El Salvador, his potential return falls solely under the purview of that nation's executive decisions, compelling the US government only to facilitate the process, if requested. The Oval Office meeting took on a particularly disquieting tone when it became evident that President Trump and President Nayib Bukele appeared to engage in a form of political theater. Standing side by side, the two leaders seemed to underscore their disregard for the legal and constitutional requirements governing deportation. Their interaction, laden with caustic humor and dismissiveness, suggested that neither was inclined to adhere to the Supreme Court's ruling. This defiance not only signals a disregard for judicial authority, but also hints at a willingness to embrace international partnerships that undermine established legal norms. The implications of this stance reach far beyond the immediate issue of repatriating a single individual. By openly flouting a unanimous Supreme Court decision, the administration has set a precedent for executive overreach, raising alarms about the potential erosion of the checks and balances that underpin American democracy. Critics argue that such behavior edges the nation closer to a constitutional crisis, a situation in which the supremacy of the law is undermined by the very institution sworn to enforce it. When the executive branch chooses to disregard a binding judicial ruling, it not only mocks the legal process, but also invites a dangerous transformation in how governance is conducted. In the realm of political discourse, few moments have been as polarizing as this exchange in the Oval Office. Prominent voices from across the political spectrum have weighed in on the matter. Conservative commentators such as Stephen Miller have attempted to reframe the issue in terms of national security and border control. They assert that strict enforcement of immigration laws, including the deportation of individuals tied to criminal organizations, is essential for maintaining order. Yet, these same voices are quick to dismiss the fact that, by ignoring due process, the administration inadvertently undermines the foundational legal protections that safeguard civil liberties. As the adage attributed to conservative thinker Ben Shapiro reminds us, facts don't care about your feelings. Yet in this debate, facts are being overlooked in favor of politically convenient narratives. Both sides of the political divide find themselves embroiled in a broader debate about the balance between law enforcement and constitutional rights. Proponents of stringent border security argue that the deportation of individuals with serious criminal allegations is non-negotiable. They contend that the removal of such persons is a necessary step in protecting American citizens. On the other hand, advocates for due process maintain that every individual, regardless of their legal status or alleged crimes, is entitled to a fair judicial process. This divergence in viewpoints is at the heart of a fundamental struggle, deciding whether the United States will adhere to the principles of democracy or succumb to a system that allows one individual to operate above the law. The situation is further complicated by the role that international relations play in this domestic issue. By aligning closely with a leader who styles himself in authoritarian terms, President Nayib Bukele, the president not only challenges the supremacy of US law, but also blurs the lines between domestic policy and foreign affairs. The partnership appears to be less about collaborative governance and more about an ideological alignment with autocratic practices. This confluence of domestic legal defiance and international authoritarianism ultimately sends a message that has significant implications for the nation's future. As the report unfolds, one cannot ignore the broader context in which these events are taking place. The administration's resolute dismissal of the Supreme Court's ruling is emblematic of a growing trend, a willingness to prioritize political expediency over legal obligation. With every instance of defiance, the separation of powers, a cornerstone of American democracy, is further threatened. The notion that the president can simply sidestep constitutional mandates is a perilous one, heralding the possibility of a governance model where legal norms are subservient to the whims of political leaders. The ramifications of this confrontation are profound. Should the administration continue to disregard the judicial system, the United States may find itself on the precipice of a constitutional crisis, defined not only by legal transgressions, but by an eroding respect for the rule of law. The evident cavalier attitude towards the Supreme Court's directive undermines the integrity of all branches of government and raises critical questions about accountability and the future of democratic processes. In conclusion, the Oval Office meeting between President Trump and President Nayib Bukele has unveiled deep-seated divisions in the interpretation and application of the law. By defying a unanimous Supreme Court ruling, the administration has not only challenged the legal process, but has also signaled a disturbing shift toward authoritarian-style governance. This episode serves a stark reminder that upholding due process is not merely a legal formality, it is the bedrock of democratic society. As the nation grapples with these challenges, it is imperative that citizens remain vigilant and demand accountability from their leaders. The continued erosion of the rule of law portends a future where the principles of justice and fairness may be irrevocably compromised, and it falls upon all who cherish democratic ideals to stand firm in defense of constitutional integrity.